and every story can change the world. Together we are Global Speakers Talk.
So, how many of you here have a bank account? So, I guess most of us do, right? Now, if you have a bank account, I'm sure you've monitored it, you've protected it, made deposits into it, right? And you watched it grow. Now, here's my real question. When was the last time you checked the balance, not of your bank account, but the balance of your life? Now, for more than 25 years, I help people manage financial portfolios worth millions of dollars. I worked in banking and risk management and eventually served as chief risk officer. Now, my role was to help organizations protect what mattered, assess risks, allocate resources wisely, and make sound decisions for the future. But you know what? Somewhere along the way, I realized something interesting. Now, while most people know how to manage a financial portfolio, after all, we're taught that in school, yet very few know how to manage a life portfolio. And that's where the problem lies. Because, while money is important, we all agree it's important, right? Life was never meant to be measured by financial wealth alone. Because at the end of our lives, nobody asks, how much did you earn? How many promotions did you receive? How many awards did you collect? At the end of it all, the deeper question becomes, who did you become during your lifetime? Who did you impact? Who did you love? And what kind of life did you build? Because you see, life is a portfolio, and every single day we are investing not just money, but we invest our time, we invest our energy, we invest our attention, we invest emotions, we invest every second that we have in life. Now, just like any investment portfolio, the quality of our outcomes depends on where we place our deposits. Now, the challenge today is that many people are successful on paper, they have their careers built up, accumulated wealth, and yet they have become bankrupt in the areas that matter most. Nowadays, we live in a world that celebrates achievement. But the thing is, achievement without alignment can really be very expensive. That at the end of the day, we suffer and have empty lives. So we can go on in a loop where we accumulate accomplishments, but in the process, we neglect ourselves. We neglect the people who matter. We build careers while we lose connection with the people we care. We can pursue success at the expense of joy. Now, I know that because I have lived that reality myself. So, after years of pursuing excellence and climbing the corporate ladder, I was faced with a situation that no title, no bonus, no achievement could match. And it all happened during the pandemic. So, how many of you here had their lives changed by the pandemic? For me, it changed big time. Because I still remember the day that became the turning point in my life. So, I was Senior Vice President, Chief Risk Officer, and it was March 13, 2020, just a few days before we were going into lockdown. Me and my team are very busy because pandemic risk response was under my shop. Then, in the midst of all the preparations, my phone rings. It was my sister-in-law from Canada, and she tells me, "Sis, are you busy?" I wanted to scream at her, yell at her, and tell her, "Of course I'm busy. We're preparing for the pandemic lockdown. But there was an urgency in that call and in the tone of her voice that made me pause. And it was then that she broke the news that my daughter was suffering from depression and she was thinking of ending her life. It was a risk personally I wasn't prepared for. And that made me really pause and ask, what am I really investing in? And is the return worth the cost? So that journey led me to create a framework I now call the Life's Bank. Because just like a financial portfolio, life has different accounts that require our intentional deposits. So the first account is leadership, not leadership of others, but leadership of self. Because before we can lead a team, a company, a family, or a movement, we must first learn to lead ourselves. And the second account is impact. Because at the end of the day, we only have a limited time on earth. So, how are we using our gifts, talents, and experiences to contribute to something larger than ourselves? What legacy are we leaving behind? The third account is family, because they're the people who know us beyond our titles. They are the people who see us not for what we do, but for who we really are. And the fourth account is emotional strength, because life will test us. Life will test every one of us. And resilience is not built during the storm, it's built through the deposits we make long before the storm arrives. And the fifth account is social connection, the friendships, the community, and the relationships that remind us that we were never meant to do life alone. Now, here's an important thing I've learned, because people often talk about achieving work life balance. But the truth is, there's no such thing. Because if you've ever managed a financial portfolio, if you have several bank accounts, you know that these accounts would never carry the same balance all the time. There are some seasons in our life that require greater investments in one area than another. Like if we're raising children, your family account may need more deposits. When you're building a business, your leadership and impact accounts may demand more attention. When you're navigating adversity, your emotional strength account may require greater care. Because at the end of the day, life was never meant to be equally balanced, but it was never meant to be neglected either. Because just as your typical financial bank accounts, if it doesn't receive deposits, it eventually becomes dormant. And if left unattended long enough, it can close account. So the same thing happens in our lives. Relationship can grow distant, purpose can become unclear, confidence weakens, connection fades. Not because something dramatic happens, but because we stop making the deposits. Those small, consistent things like a conversation, a thank you, a walk with someone you love. It's the constant choice to be truly present. They may not seem that significant in the moment, but over time, they create extraordinary returns. Just like when you have those piggy banks where you put drop a coin every now and then, you know, those count as intentional deposits day after day compounds. So before I leave you today, I'd like to offer these three questions. What accounts in your life is thriving today? What accounts have you unintentionally neglected? And what is one deposit you can make into that account before this day ends? Because one day all of us will receive the final statement of our lives. Not a bank statement, but our life statement. It won't show our salaries, it won't show our titles, it won't show the awards you have on the wall or the letters after our name. Instead, it will reveal something far more important. It will reveal how we led, how we loved, and how we served, and how we showed up for the people that mattered most. So at the end of the day, we have to ask if we have intentionally invested in a life worth living. And I hope that when that time comes, you can smile and say, I lived intentionally, I invested wisely, I became more than what I accumulated, and most importantly, I invested where it counts. Because life is a portfolio, and every day is another opportunity to make that deposit. Thank you.
Together we are global speakers talk.